What's up everyone? Welcome to my free coaching today. I hope you're ready for what's to come. I want to give you a better insights into my study routine and show what I've learned recently. I will switch up the topic a little bit because I've recently studied a lot of 3-bet pots, so that's what I will focus on. I use a variety of different tools from own solutions that I've ran, depending on the spot a bit, to Odin for quite a lot to look them up, and then GTO Wizard as well. I think there's a tool that has merit for a variety of different situations. What I want to show you is generally some takeaways from that. There is one nice view in GTO Wizard that I just wanted to show you. Odin also has great aggregation reports. So if let's say we want to look at 4-bet pots, 3-bet pot, we can then look at the different positions. So I've played a lot of small blind against button. There's a variety of different things to take away here. And if you're maybe not so familiar with this, let me just give you a quick rundown of what that is. So Odin is a database of hundreds of thousands of solved solutions. So is GTO Wizard. And basically the idea is that we use this to study to get a better understanding of a spot. We do also have a lot of solutions on a variety of different spots that we ran ourselves, but this is also has an interface on top and is sometimes easier to navigate. So I use a mix of a variety of different things. And so what I wanted to show you is if, for example, you want to progress and you want to get a better understanding, it might be a bit difficult on your own, but I will walk you through and I will share some of my learnings. So there will be some nuggets for you to take away. And the focus of today's spot is 3-bet pots in late position. Small blind against button is the spot we're choosing. And we're going to look at it for 40 big blinds deep. Right now, we could either vary between the two spots or we can play only one of the spots. So here I've selected that I only play out of position. What I wanted to show you is generally one of the first things that I would recommend you to do is if we go here, we can take a look at the ranges we're looking at. So here's basically the action tree. And so we can look at, okay, what did button open raise? This is the range that we're looking at. Then we can look at, okay, what small blind responds after a button has raised. So we do have some all-ins, 40 big blinds deep, but not too many. It's like those suited hands that don't want a 3-bet fold, some value hands that also benefit from folds, but both from calls. So that's like 8-7s and ace queen, ace jack off. And that builds like a pretty unexploitable range of hands that benefit from the shove for different reasons. And then if we look at the non-all-in 3-betting range, we have something like this. So quite some offsuit broadways, they can easily 3-bet fold, some offsuit aces that also fall in the same category. Obviously all our value hands that want to 3-bet call. And then we have some of the weakish suited high card hands like king 6, queen 6 fall very much in that category that also 3-bet fold. That is the range we're looking at. So it's a 13% range that 3-bets from the small blind, the button calls. So obviously the button has some shoving as well, mostly with pockets, with some of the lower suited aces, and then with ace jack off plus ace queen suited. Definitely a lot of players play like this. Maybe call ace jack off too often and shove less of those suited aces, but generally it looks somewhat like that. So this is basically the starting point we look at. Obviously the range we see then in the 3-bet pot is this. So very condensed, a bit less of the top offsuited ace X hands, right? But very much all these suited hands that are strong enough to continue. Whereas if we look at the small blind 3-betting range again, not really, right? Only those offsuit hands, very ace X heavy, some of the offsuit broadways, but like more of the top range. So we should have an equity advantage on basically all flops. And then the question is on which flops more and which flops less. The first thing I look at is I want to get a good understanding of the two ranges we look at. Obviously players will already make mistakes here, right? Like I think the open raise, a lot of players play like this, about the 50% open. The 3-betting, not so much, right? Like I think basically no players have a shoving range. Population doesn't really have a shoving range. I would say population finds almost enough 3-bets here. So we look at a bit of a tighter range against population, and they will probably also not 3-bet those hands, but just flat them. They might also make the mistake to 3-bet hands that they shouldn't 3-bet, like those hands that are a bit too strong. So there's definitely already some mistakes that we will see population is doing, but we're not going to see a crazy different. The calling range though will look quite a bit different. More calling in the lower pocket pairs, less calling in the lower suited hands, less calling king 10 off and queen 10 off is probably almost entirely folded by population. Just to keep in mind, it's not going to look crazily different, but yeah, a bit tighter, a bit less around the lower end. Now, what I actually wanted to show you is called reports. There's different varieties to look at aggregation reports. What I like a lot personally is this view, which is basically going from a deuce on the left to the ace on the right. So we can look at all flop combinations. So on the entire left is deuce, 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 and on the entire right is ace, ace, ace. What we can see on the bottom is how often we're betting, how often we're checking. So green is check, purple is all in. So this is the small blind strategy after it went 3-bet, button calls, and then we are on any flop, right? And this is the aggregation of all these different flops. Generally a pretty high level of aggression, and the structure of the board makes a big difference. You know, if we look at this, you know, this is sorted by check now. A lot of boards are being checked very little. What we see is the more we check, the more big bets start. When we have the most checks, we also have the most amount of big bets happening. So there is a lot of boards where we start polarizing more on the flop already. We check more and we bet big more. So as you can see already, monotone boards, very different, right? No big bets, basically. Very little big bets. Lots of small bets, and when they're more connected, a bit more of the medium size and more checking. That's generally what we see on monotone boards. If the board is very strongly connected, we see lots of those very big bets and much more checking, more polarized approach. After I've taken a look at that, I will start playing and kind of get an idea of where I make mistakes, and always look at the ranges to get a good understanding of the equilibrium, right? I don't want to memorize a spot. I want to understand the toy game so that I can play any situation and solve the spot on the spot. So what I would suggest now is let's just play a few spots. All right, king queen on ace 10 8. So what do we know? 10 ace, right? Quite high level of aggression. I don't think we should have very many all-ins on this flop. It's a flop. I know it's one of the flops we play the most aggressive. Ace 10 9, ace 10 8. We push out a lot of equity against large bet. Even queen jack can't continue. We have a very big range advantage. Our opponent has lots of draws, right? Like lots of jack 9 suited, queen 9 suited, queen jack offsuit, king jack, king queen, which our hand is not necessarily needing to push out aggressively. In our range strategy, I think we will see very aggressive betting, rather small amount of, so I'm always trying to think about my range frequency. So I will bet this flop basically 100% of the time with few small bets, lots of very large bets. I'm not sure about if I want to introduce an all-in sizing. I would intuitively go for a large sizing with this hand. Rolling a 34, so if you haven't seen the RNG or the dice before, so 100 is the most aggressive action for me, and 0 is the most passive action. So if I think that this hand 50% of the time goes all in and 50% of the time checks or whatever, then if it's a 34, then it would be a check. And if it's a 52, then it's an all in. And if it's a 90, it's also an all in. I will definitely choose an aggressive action with this hand all the time, so no checking. Now the only question is between a big bet and a very big bet. For your reference, this is 10%, 25%, 50, 75, 100%, and all in. I'm debating between half pot and shove, or I'm thinking whether my range is strong enough to have some shoves. And if I do have some shoves, I probably want to take hands like queen jack. Not sure if king queen with the king of spades are kind of like in that category, but I will go for the half pot bet. Here you can see the EV of the different actions. In terms of range frequency, I want to hit that, so it's 0% check. It's a lot of half potting, not very much small betting. A bit more small betting than I thought. It does introduce some all-ins, and it has a lot of 75% bet, which I find interesting. The preferred bet size with king queen, king of spades actually was 25% pot. Again, we're in the small blind 3-betting, and I want to say one again, choosing sizings is probably the hardest part. Playing the more passive line is much easier. We want to make sure we get a good understanding of the overall range and where our hand falls into our range. So we have a somewhat similar spot, extremely high betting frequency, basically 100%, jack 8, lots of draws, possible quite some draws, a bit less than the 10, so it started to drop slightly. I will not have any all-ins. I don't think I will have any pot sizing. I will have quite a lot of B50. I want to have some B25, and I think I do want to have some B75. I think A7 I want to put in my large bet quite a lot. I would say I would maybe take a 20%, 25% in B75 and mostly in B50 and maybe a bit in B25, but that could be wrong. Yeah, that's pretty accurate. 3% checking, quite a lot of half potting. I did hit a great candidate for B75, and I think I sorted the hand quite well into the category that it belongs into. Now the question is, if I want to have any checks at all with this hand, I don't think I do want to check some ace X, and the question is what ace X I want to check. So now this is quite advanced, how much equity plays a role and how much blockers play a role. I think the 7 of diamonds blocks basically nothing. Not having a spade, he should continue flush draws. He shouldn't really have 7-9, 7-10, so I think I just shove this pure and go with it. So one thing I'd be looking at now is like, okay, what ace-x do I want to check? Ace-king seems to be a good candidate. Yeah, ace-king being the best candidate. Kings we check if we get there. I mean, it's a small frequency play, but basically, again, it's more important for me to identify the logic. I mean, I know I can either shove or check this without a very big EV loss, but I do think it's important to identify which ace-x I want to check. I do want to have some ace-x checking. I'm thinking if I want to check ace-jack, but I don't get to this line with ace-jack. But yeah, that's basically the idea how I approach these spots. So I just want to make sure that I make some good decisions here. And he had 4 or 5 of spade. All right, 9-4-3 monotone, 100%. Chat, this is your time now. Come on. What do we do? With this hand, I choose the b10 most of the time, but with the 100, I might choose the b25. I'm not sure if we have b50. It is very difficult. b25. This was the correct answer, but I do like that we hit the right frequency. b10 is being used much more. b25 is the majority, and we don't really check. At least that we have nailed. He calls. We are on the turn. We can now check or bet committing. What do we like? We can shove, we can bet, we can check. All in, check, bet. The moment you ask chat, you get all 3 answers. How would we play together if we play together? How can we make this relationship work? This is a tricky spot, right? We want to get called by worse. We don't really fold out better. So all in just doesn't feel like that's the play. I mean, there might be merit in folding out, like ace 10 of diamond. Nah, I mean, I think there's merit in checking, but 77, I think I want to be betting this hand. I do think that I can bet call this hand. I do think that there's a level of aggression that makes sense to put certain hands indifferent. And I can see this hand being a bet and then decide on river. But what am I realistically folding out here with a small bet? I don't really know. All in is the play and chat wins. So it is much more polarized. It is only between all in and checking, and the king of spades gets jammed all the time. Now, like, to understand that, we kind of got to see what our opponent does against the shove, and I want to see what he's folding. Really curious about that. So if we shove on the turn, button is calling. What is he folding though? What is he folding? Okay, he folds king queen. I mean, he folds ace 10. He folds ace 10 of basically the hand I mentioned. So ace 10 of diamonds is what we attack. Pocket fives, no spade. So yeah, I guess it makes sense. And we also sometimes get it in good against like king 6 of spades, which is like, yeah, so there is definitely some merit in the king jack jam, and probably then jamming makes most sense. We fold out those better hands. We get some calls from worse. Makes a lot of sense. All right, I changed my, like, now there's a logic we take with us, right? Like on this board on the turn, like there's some hands we fold out, like ace 10 of diamonds, pocket fives, no spade. We want to maximize fold equity and equity realization at the same time when we do that the most with this hand with the all in. So all in would have been the right sizing and I missed it. And that's our first inaccuracy. And that's exactly where we can see that this was a shitty play, because now what do we do, right? I guess I check. Never really beating anything. Ah, no, king 6 was the flush. I don't know what I was talking about. There was no worse hand that was calling, I guess. Yeah, queen 10 is the worst hand that's calling. That's about it. I check. And it's a pure jam. I didn't think that it was a pure jam, but it makes some sense. But it's such a low frequency line that probably one of the worst hands I get with king of spades being a decent card. Makes sense that there's a very little difference. All right, now I guess we're just folding that. Oh, it's actually, well, this is actually a bluff catcher. Okay, I mean, again, super low frequency, but this is interesting. Yes, so guys, there you see where solvers go wild. What are we catching against? I guess it's basically, it makes sense, right? It's like the queen 10, queen jack is bluffing on river. Block some value, we unblock some bluffs, I guess. Must be the reason. It goes check, let's take a look at bluffing range. Queen jack off, bluffs. Queen 10 off, bluffs pure. King 10 off. I mean, bluffs with the king of spades, which is not great for our hand. Yeah, so queen 10 and queen jack bluff, and we don't really block that. I mean, we do have the jack of hearts. Yeah, Jack of Hearts he sometimes gives up. That's how you can see, like, obviously this is not how players play, but in an equilibrium in a toy game, you need to make sure you hit the right frequencies. Poker can be tricky. It's kind of like chess computers, you know, you play against a chess computer and they're just absolutely wrecking you, and then you're like, wow, what is he doing? But if you play against it, you feel like, then you feel. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you want to support the channel and stay always up to date, then leave a subscribe here or check out our next video.